The next speaker is Ken Carter. He got his PhD at Oregon State, and he then went on to USF, where he rose to the ranks all the way to Professor Emeritus. I guess that's the end state. He's been a member of many NASA and ONR programs, advisory committees, and science teams. In 2012, he won the Murloff Award.
Ray and Ron, and George, and Howard. Who else is up there? Let's hear it. Yes. But, and I think you saw the boat that these guys went out. Was that the same time, Ron? You had your boat up there?
Yeah.
Okay, so the picture we saw earlier of George and Ron and Howard, you were on the boat. Did you go on that trip to the boat?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I just came in at the end. We got
It's a delight being here.
I signed the contract to go to ONR program manager on the hood of a car outside that meeting while it was going on.
And you've been a main supporter now. You've been one of the key lecturers, if you want to call that, visiting professors.
Yeah.
For about, what, 4 of those? You started in 96 or 92?
I think I've done there was another 3 or 4 at Maine, and others been like 5 or 6 at Maine.
Yeah.
Or 3 or 4 at UW and 5 or 6 at Maine. Yeah.
Okay, so it's delightful to see going from kind of the ocean color to a quantitative product of chlorophyll. And to get between these two steps, you had to go from, well, some of the pictures Hovis was taking was of barges going up in New York City dumping their trash out. And then they wanted to see how it dispersed, so they put dye in it, and they used the ocean color basically from an aircraft to see how the dye dispersed and carried down. So everyone basically, and it was quantitative, looked at satellite oceanography or aircraft oceanography as just kind of ray tracing of currents or something like that, quantitative. So Howard and Ray and Ron and George got the business going of really determining what was important to get you from this to a radiative transfer model, giving you a radiance at the top of the atmosphere that could be related to a radiance coming out of the ocean, which could be related to the absorption due to and scattering to the constituents of the ocean, and then breaking the color of that up into various substances like chlorophyll, dissolved organic carbon, and other such things. So this was basically a process of about 6 years. When did you first make this this image? I think Bob, you put that together, didn't you, the one on the right? Putting all of the CZCS images together.
I don't recall what the names were.
Well, anyway, which button do I push? Just forward it back. If we go back, I can speak a little bit to what Ross just said. I was hired in the summer of 1980 by Stan Wilson, who had been hired when the Nimbus 7 satellite and the CSAT, which was a topographical satellite. Topex is the one now. Those flew. Now, the sensors that were of interest to headquarters was the coastal zone color scanner and the SIMR, scattering multi-channel microwave radiometer, and also the topography sensor on CSAT. So they could do the physical oceanography. So Stan Wilson had been a program manager at the Office of Naval Research, and he actually had a biological degree as an undergraduate, and they switched to physical oceanography. So he was actually the guy that became Mr. Interdisciplinary at NASA headquarters and began to think we should really be putting the hydrodynamics that you can get from a topography experiment together with the primary production, and then ultimately the zooplankton to come up with more of a global look at the oceans, not only the hydrodynamics, but also the productivity of the ocean. So he hired me, and it was kind of like Ross's hiring. I had applied about a year earlier and forgot about it. I applied before I got promoted to full professor. I figured it'd be the backup, you know, if I don't get full professor, screw on the middle league. But after I had been promoted, I got this phone call. Hey, you want to come up and do a little work at headquarters? I had been doing basically particle optics, and I hadn't been doing any remote sensing at all. But I was ready for a break, so I did go up. And what I found was what Ross just described. Nobody at headquarters was paying any attention at all to what was going on at Goddard. And the people at Goddard weren't getting any help for the most part from the other centers. So it was just a real mismatch of capabilities. If you go back to 78, Nimbus 7 was launched not just about the same time that CSAT died. CSAT was a topography experiment. So all the physical oceanographers were rolling around wondering what they were going to do. They just had a couple of sensors, a scanning multi-channel microwave radiometer, to give them some information on things like salinity and things like that. But Nimbus 7 came up, and at that particular time, we were trying to get funding for more coastal zone color scanner work. And the physical oceanographers were running around trying to get their next TOPAX, or topographical satellite, funded. So they were fighting against the ocean color community from day one for the next satellite after the coastal zone color scanner. So the next step, in addition to competing for resources, which in this basically was power to run your sensor. This is almost impossible to find an old wiring diagram. I was able to pull this one up, but you can see that headquarters up there where the chief scientists, et cetera, are, comes down to each of the centers, and the ones that are marked with a star represent the ones that actually had some people that were doing either aircraft, remote sensing, and a lot of it was Landsat related. And some of them there were a few of them had oceanography, biological oceanography, I think. Wallace and Langley were the ones that had some aircraft that had some ocean interest. And for the most part, you couldn't get the managers there to talk to each other. The directors of each of those were independent. You send money down, they said, kiss off, don't tell us how to spend it. So the first thing Stan and I had to do was figure out a way of extracting the dollars that were being sent to these centers and being used for looking at farm ponds and rivers that would not fit a 1 kilometer footprint pixel of the coastal zone color scanner. Some way to get those guys decoupled from that research and out into the ocean where we could do some work. There are only a couple of groups that were willing to make the transition. And Wayne Assayas and Janet Campbell were the two that we were able to save out of that. It turns out the Langley director was so adamant about controlling the spending, he shut down the entire oceanography program, which included all the physical oceanographers and the biological oceanographers. But anyway, that money was freed up. And we could put it into the ocean color program. We could fund biologists, we could fund chemists, we could fund physical oceanographers, optical oceanographers, and we could get out of the farms and out of the rivers and into the oceans. So, Ross, you were about 5 or 6 years too early. I couldn't find find a list of the Nimbus experiment team members, but because that first publication in 1980, when you were showing what the coastal zone color scanner was about, I assumed that all the Nimbus team members were represented there. Is that about right, Howard?
Yeah, Ed Baker was taking the place of John Bell. John Bell didn't have.
And Austin was a member, and Wilson was his cohort. Is that right?
No, Ross was from the Scripps. Wilson was Ross.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But Ross was on the team, and Wilson was just, was he on the team too, or?
No,
Yeah.
when he was done his graduate student.
There were two biologists on that group, Charlie Yatch and El Sayed. And so it was an interdisciplinary group. Okay, I've kind of gone over a little bit of this. About 1981, Stan Wilson was talking about how we're going to compete for the next satellite flights. Headquarters has to plan about 6 or 7 years in advance. Marlon can attest to that. He was the first Ocean Color manager that was successful in getting another satellite, Ocean Color satellite flying. And you were there about 87 or 88, something like that. Yeah. So that took 10 years or 8 years after I came there for us to get another flight going. But in the meantime, Stan Wilson, who came from ONR, thought that, gosh, how are we going to compete with these physical oceanographers? You know, talking about ocean color, people aren't going to be interested in ocean color. Let's talk about something vigorous, you know, like global productivity. And so the name was kind of changed to the Ocean Productivity Program, Global Productivity. But the bottom line is measuring chlorophyll was the first step, and then trying to figure out how fast the plants were fixing that chlorophyll, and it's being grazed and exported to the bottom and recycled, etc. Barney was talking about, was the next piece of that. And if you look really at the global environmental change program, that we started right here. When we tried to get MODIS and justification for MODIS and CWIFs, the whole focus was on climate change. And this started in the early 80s. So Howard, you're blamed for that. Most of these papers have already been represented by other authors, or other speakers. The paper in 1973 was a very important one because simplifying the calculations made it possible to do it, tremendous amount of the atmospheric correction as well as interpretation of what was coming out of the ocean. Ross Austin had flown some aircraft, and he did a very nice job of dealing with the aircraft interface and looking at the radiance distribution that was coming out of below the surface as well. Howard's paper in 78 has already been mentioned. Warren Hovis did this Nimbus experiment team presentation of the first images out of Nimbus 7 coastal zone color scanner, as well as some of their initial descriptions. But it wasn't really, it was more an introductory paper. The quantitative portion of that was done by Howard and Dennis, and then later on, Gordon Clark Brown, etc. As you go down that list, we look at the Warm Core Rings program finally, down here toward the bottom. That was the first opportunity to get headquarters money that had been redirected from other places into supporting an aircraft program, a P3 program to fly over the Warm Core Rings at the same time the satellite was taking measurements, drop expendable thermographs so you could see what the vertical structure was of the Warm Core Rings in the region around it. direct ships into the center of this feature and take a number of optical measurements at the same time. So at that particular time, I was able to get an Office of Naval Research and an NSF program manager on board that aircraft and go out and see the laser firing away and expendable Baffin photographs dropping. And as a result of that, Mary Jane Perry, who was the NSF program manager at the time, declared that any large feature, interdisciplinary NSF program had to have a remote sensing component. And so what is the importance of ONR and NSF? They had the ships and NASA did not. So if you can't get the ships and the funding for something that's considered practical by the Navy, by the National Science Foundation, you're just playing with color pictures. You've got to take ocean color to some quantitative product that people in other fields were interested in. I finally ended up with this final Evans and Gordon 1994, and the full system calibration was a very important part, and it kept dying. You see recalibrations and recalibrations, so finally putting it all together and coming up with a function that wouldn't go up and down, but eventually could kind of explain the gentle system decay was critical. And the calibration had to be there all along. We put it at the end here, but that's simply because this is the full system history of the calibration. So this has been more from the perspective of the program manager that this talk is given, and from the respect that the program manager has for the team and its chief. Thank you.
Any questions for Ken? All right, just a comment. One is, if Friday Harbor, meeting well, 1939,
Yeah.
a lot of the students there are now leaders in biological engineering.
Right.
That was terrific. I'd also like to say that the program managers, the NASA program managers, 2 years
For the team and its chief. Thank you.